Do emotions have a place in the workplace? Yes. If you want to do business successfully, you need to learn to do business with your emotions. Join us today as we learn about the value of emotions and how to recognize and harness them.
Hello there, my name is Walter Seib and I'm the CEO of HMS Host International. Wherever you are in this big world, thank you for joining us today. This podcast is part of our well-being series. At HMS Host International, we believe in the value of well-being and the impact of this on performance and culture. It is a natural extension of return on attention. When we give attention to the health and well-being of our associates can give the best attention to our guests and our business partners, and our company flourishes. Without further ado, please relax, get comfortable, and enjoy our podcast.
As part of our well-being strategy for HMS Host International, we record a series of podcasts which address various psychological needs that our people across the globe have in common. Our previous podcast was on dealing with stress, and today we welcome Monique Schuurmans. Monique is an owner of her own company called Scout, Professionals in Recruiting and Developing. She coaches leadership and management teams on entrepreneurial skills, leadership skills, and all sorts of soft skills. Monique works with various companies across industries. She's become an absolute expert in emotional flexibility. Thank you for joining us today, Monique, and for talking with me about one of our favorite topics, the value of emotions at work.
Thank you, Milanka, for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of this well-being strategy. I have enjoyed working with HMS Host International over the past few years in learning and development efforts across the various countries, and I loved my collaboration with all of you. So I'm looking forward, with COVID being gone, hopefully, to travel again and meet everyone in person.
Great. Thank you. Today we're going to talk about the value of emotions in business. And interestingly enough, it's becoming more and more recognized. Mm-hmm. Is this something, Monique, you're also noticing amongst other companies within other industries?
Yeah, for sure. Emotions are everywhere. Like an estimated 95% of the things we do on autopilot. And when we act on autopilot, emotions are always in the lead. So without knowing, emotions are there almost all the time. So emotions are often thought of as anger or sadness or, like the more heavy kind of emotions. But there are way more emotions than those two or three. Like calm is also an emotion, or worry, or positiveness, or friendliness, or so curiosity. Almost everything we do is driven by emotions.
Interesting. So we have all kinds of emotions and they're pretty much everywhere in whatever we do. So
exactly.
If I go and interact with colleagues or even walk through the supermarket or greet my neighbor.
Exactly. Emotions are a result of a prediction that our brain makes in order to keep us safe and well. And emotions lead always to decision-making and behavior. So from there, it's very important to know that they are there and to recognize them and to value them as well.
Monique, you just previously mentioned that emotions help us in decision-making. How else do emotions have an impact on how we do the business?
Well, they have an impact on our behavior because decision-making always leads to behavior. So they affect the performance of people in business. They affect also the way we connect, communicate, and collaborate with others. So they have a huge impact on empathic leadership as well.
Interesting. I'm so curious, though, why do we have so many emotions?
Well, that stems from years and years and years ago, from the prehistoric times where emotions serve the goal of keeping us safe and well. As you can imagine, it doesn't come in handy if you start with building a house when winter already came, or that you started hunting the cattle when you are actually hungry. So our whole bodily system, our whole brain is there to keep us safe and to predict what is the next best step to do in order to keep the safety. And so we learned to predict the future, and emotions serve that goal. So emotions like worry help us to build a house before the snow falls. And emotions like success help us to want to chase cattle before the hunger starts. And emotions like friendliness or joy help us to connect with others in order to not be alone, because alone in the field you were not able to survive, right?
It's true, right? Yeah, people always lived in communities, didn't they?
Exactly.
And did things together.
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, I really perceive myself as a rather emotional person. And I've heard several times at home or from friends or even at work, I don't get so emotional. But you're actually saying that emotions are not bad. Because my perception was always I needed to somehow have control over them or limit them in some way.
No, emotions are really of great value. And sometimes they're not effective, but they're always of value. And it's really important to try and understand them, because sometimes they do not serve the actual situation, but by recognizing them and reflecting upon them, you could make a new judgment and feel if they are actually serving you in the moment.
Interesting.
Emotions, and that's an important thing to know as well. And I love that thought. Emotions fill the gap. They fill the gap between intention and behavior. So you want something. You have an ambition, for example, in a certain kind of situation at work or at home or in your relation or when going into a meeting. And the difference between this ambition or intention and your actual behavior is always influenced by emotions.
Interesting. You said meeting. And, you know, the other day I was in a meeting and I noticed that I was actually getting emotional, annoyed, whilst I was interacting with a colleague. And I really wasn't feeling okay. And interestingly enough, I like meetings, I like social interactions, but it surprised me that I felt this way.
Well, if you reflect back, and that's what you did, that's already a really, really good thing, because what you did was afterward, like investigate if this emotion helped you or not. And sometimes, especially when you're acting on autopilot, you are led by emotions that do not serve the actual situation because your brain gets the impression that you're not safe. So maybe you didn't feel connected at that moment, or maybe you felt like not being heard, or maybe, you felt unsafe because you thought that people were judging you.
No, I think you're spot on there. I do think I didn't actually feel that I was being heard.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And here I thought, why am I getting so emotional? But it's just a core need, isn't it? It's me needing to be heard.
Yeah, but maybe, you were heard. And that's the thing. If you reflect on emotions and you are able to do that in the moment, and you have to practice a lot to do that, but we can, and it's really important to do so, then you could adapt them maybe in the moment and see that you are being heard, or you are actually safe. And maybe it's not about you, but about the other people who are into something, that you couldn't see or feel at that moment. So that there can be a lot going on that influences how people communicate. But it's also, it's always led by emotions.
Yeah. And you're just taking us back into the old days, let's say, in the cavemen. So what do you think in the old times was the impact of not being heard?
Well, if you were not heard or not seen, then you would end up alone. And if you were alone, you couldn't survive, right? Because you cannot catch an elephant or a saber-toothed tiger or, whatever on your own, right?
Oh, gosh, no.
Or you cannot build a house on your own. You cannot reproduce on your own, right?
Impossible.
So that's why we all need to belong. We all have this need to belong because we cannot survive.
And so probably my
Otherwise.
colleague who reacted towards me also might not have felt safe. So
Exactly.
Interesting.
And that all happens unawarely.
Yes, and we all bring emotions to the table.
Always.
And I can only imagine that our associates working in operations are dealing with guests and their emotions from all over the world.
Exactly.
It's, yeah.
Exactly. And all these guests have emotions as well, right? So they could be nervous because they want to catch a plane, or they could be in a hurry or whatever. So there can be all kinds of things going on. And if this behavior of our guests give us the feeling that we are not safe, that it's about us, then we might react from there. So we might react offensive or defensive, or maybe even, like freeze. And then the guest might react upon that as well. So it hugely influences the way we interact with each other.
Oh, yes. And that becomes a very complicated cycle of emotions, of back and forth. And that's the last thing we want. We really want harmony and a good feeling for our guests in our stores and for our associates.
Exactly.
Interesting. So we definitely should not ignore nor neglect our emotions. In fact, if we tell people not to express their emotions, we're creating an unsafe workplace, aren't we?
Yes, that's true. Because, well, like we said before, emotions are everywhere and they are there to keep us safe. And it's not only about physical safety, right? It's also about emotional and social safety, especially at the workplace. And the funny thing is that if we feel safe, we are way more better capable of connecting with other people in a good way and connecting with ourselves in a good way. So it's also highly of influence on the way we do our jobs. And we have fun doing that.
So would you agree that there is actually no such thing as positive or negative emotions? Because that's a judgment.
Yes, well, it helps us to define emotions, but it's not that negative emotions are bad and positive emotions are good. It's all about how effective and how true are they.
Yeah.
And then, of course, positive emotions help us to not be defensive. Because if we are being defensive because we don't feel safe, we turn like inward, right?
Yeah, or outward.
Yeah,
and then with a lot of emotions.
Out of, like the urge to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
But if we let positive emotions lead the way, we are way more open-minded, and then we become more creative, better in connecting with others, generally connecting with others, and also more daring to try new stuff, new things.
And then you have an upward cycle of emotions.
Exactly.
So you're saying basically we need to accept our emotions and learn to deal with them and probably reflect on them.
Exactly. You want to understand where they are coming from and learn how they can bring you value based on your intentions.
Great. I really love this. I think we need to do a whole other podcast on how we can tap into our emotions to realize our full intentions, as you say. One other thought. Would you not agree that we can never judge other people's emotions because they are so uniquely constructed and so are ours? So we're actually at risk of judging people based on our own frame of reference.
Love that.
So if you come across a situation, for example, where there's a colleague who's crying in the workplace or making an emotional reaction like I did in a meeting, before we judge the person, like, oh, who cries at work? Or kick yourself together, be professional in a meeting, we really need to understand and, try and understand why they react that way and not judge them.
Yes, I totally agree. And then also your own emotions have a role in that part as well, right? Because you judging the emotions of that other person also says something about your emotions as well. Like we said before, 95% of the things we do on autopilot, and everything we do on autopilot is driven by emotions. So let's not get distracted by judging emotions as, like the bad guy, and have, like cognition, like a lot of people say, being the good guy, because they always interact together. We almost do everything based upon the emotions that we feel.
Yeah, so they're of great value to us.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Monique, for joining us today. We really appreciate this discussion on emotions at the workplace. Now that we understand emotions and their value, the next session we would like to explore together how to apply these emotions in the workplace rather than probably avoiding them or ignoring them.
Great.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward.
All right.
What a great podcast. Thank you for joining us today. You can find more in this series online and on Be Connected. Until next time, please keep safe and healthy.